Veterans, a waste of a national resource. Hi everyone, welcome to Signposts for Living with Dr. Kirsten Hunter. Hello, how are you?
I'm well, thanks Kirsten. How are you?
I'm good. Everyone, we have got gorgeous Bernie Baz here. And can I say, when your parents named you, did they realise it was a cool name?
I think they might have. One of their best friends' name was Bernard, so they...
Bernie Baz. I mean, you're a businessman, but it could also be a porn star.
Thank you for that. I haven't had that one before. I have had Bernard as German for bold as a bear, so I'll stick with the bear analogy.
It's a great name. Okay, so we're here talking about Veterans, a waste of a national resource, which I thought was a fantastic title. Really, really powerful because it's so value-adding. So let's go back a little bit. So you were in the Army.
Yeah, I was in the Australian Army. Army's, a whole lot more hard work than I thought it would be.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I joined out of school. I went to the Royal Military College, did my officer training.
Yeah.
And there's too much eating stuff that looks like cat food out of tins and going for 2 weeks at a time without washing, which was the way it used to be then. So being an infantryman in the Army is very physically demanding. So I had to find something to do in the Army that was halfway civilised. So I put my hand up for pilot training.
Did you?
So I became a pilot in the Army, and that's how I ended up here in Toowoomba in Queensland, because that's where the Army had its flying training, was here in Queensland.
Okay, so this is my first of many ignorant questions. Army, pilot, I'm thinking Air Force, completely confused.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's okay. It seems to odd to a lot of people, but but Air Force do all their training and think big picture. They've got aeroplanes right up high in the sky fighting other aeroplanes or bombing things a long way away.
Yeah.
But when you operate helicopters with the infantry on the ground, you need to actually live and breathe how they work and why they do things the way they do. So Air Force simply don't get it.
Yeah.
And that's no disrespect to them, because armies simply don't get what Air Force does. So over a long period of time, because all military aviation started as army, but at the end of the First World War, the British with their Royal Flying Corps turned it into the Royal Air Force. We took the Australian Flying Corps and turned it into the Royal Australian Air Force. Even in World War II, the Americans didn't have a separate Air Force. It was the US Army Air Force.
Really?
It was only after World War II that they realised that there's just too much specialisation needed, and you need to have different people running it. So
makes a lot of sense, yeah.
Yeah. So I knew I didn't want to live in the dirt and not wash for 2 weeks at a time like an infantryman, but I knew exactly what they were doing and why they were doing it. So if they needed support, then as an army pilot, you understand intrinsically what they need and why they need it. You don't need to have it explained to you. And if you look at what's happening in Ukraine at the moment, the Ukrainian military are passionate about defending their country, and they're highly motivated, and they're doing a really good job of defending themselves against a much bigger adversary. So you do need that passion and that expertise in the fields that you're working in.
Wow, there you go. And prior to joining the Army, had you ever considered being a pilot?
No, not really. I'd never thought I'd be a pilot.
There you go. Life takes many turns, doesn't it?
So my career choices was I didn't do anything at school except play cards.
Great.
And the guy who was my card playing partner, he was away for a week. And when he got back, I said, Eccles, where have you been? You've been sick? He said, no, I got this really good lurk. You go along to army recruiting and you say you want to join the army.
Yeah.
And they send you down to Sydney and put you up in a hotel for a week and they give you money. and you go and you do all of these tests. And I said, oh, you're going to join the Army? He said, no, but next week I'm going down for Air Force training and then the selection, and the week after I'm going for Navy. So
Smart kid.
So for him it was getting 3 weeks off school and getting paid to go to Sydney. And I thought...
Tell me he went on to be a world leader.
I've got no idea where he is.
And his name was Heckles, yeah?
Eccles.
Well, he's halfway there.
Eccles.
Sorry, keep going.
So I thought, I'll take a week off school. And so I went down and did the Army exams.
Assessment, yeah.
And then I went and did the Navy ones. And then I thought I'll go and do the Air Force ones. And they said I had to do more maths. I thought, no, I'm not doing that. And I got a letter from them before I'd finished school saying, if your school results are okay, we've offered you a position. I thought, oh, that's easy. I don't have to worry about a career. So that's the sort of decision you make when you're not 17. Yeah.
There you go. So let's fast forward through time. What age did you leave the Army?
Look, I did 10 years.
Yeah.
At the time, the Army was getting more aircraft off the Air Force. The Army here was going to take on Black Hawks and Chinook helicopters, and I was flying fixed wing, which was an absolute ball, having a great time, but it wasn't mainstream.
Right.
And I wanted to fly mainstream, and the fixed wing was a bit of a dead end, and most people who were flying fixed wing didn't mind because they'd just leave and go and fly for an airline. But airline pilot flying, unless you absolutely love it, it can be a bit soul-destroying, I think, because you're away from home so often. Yeah. And if you think that you've had a hard time spending 14 hours in the back of the aeroplane, think about the poor men and women who are up the front who have to do that 3 times a week, flying in the dark, going back and forward across the world.
Not the lifestyle you wanted.
No, not what I wanted. And I thought, I'll do something different. And my brother had a clothing business, so he helped us open a clothing business, and here we are now.
There you are. So you've got this really great business happening, and that's your other world. But back to the Army world. So then when did you start becoming interested in veterans?
So about 12 years ago, because we've got a small business here in the city, I was invited to join the board of the Army's museum here at the Army base and help them put a business plan together. Yeah,
so everyone, we're in Toowoomba, which is a small regional town. It's not that small, actually, is it? It's quite big.
120, 150,000 if you include the outside areas. But
just like an hour and a half from Brisbane, Queensland, Australia.
Yep. So, Toowoomba's on the edge of the mountain range here. It's 2,000 feet above sea level, so it's really beautiful here in Toowoomba. But if you go 25 miles west, it's flat as a pancake for another 1,000 kilometres.
Yeah.
and the Army's got what was an old World War II airfield is now the Army's aviation centre.
Was it really a World War II airfield? I did not know that. So interesting.
So at the end of World War II, they parked all of the surplus Spitfires there and all the other fighter jets.
No wonder our boys want to go out there.
Yeah, and then they melted them all down.
Really?
Yeah, melted all the aluminium down for scrap. No one wanted them.
Right, okay. So that'll make a few people sad.
Made a lot of people sad. In fact, there's lots of myths out there about a couple of aeroplanes being buried because the guys who were doing the smelting were told that when those last few aeroplanes were smelted down, they could be demobilised. This is the end of World War II. And the guy who was in charge came back and he couldn't see where they'd been smelted, and he thought that they'd just dug a hole and buried these aeroplanes in their crates because they were brand new. And the story was that they thought these soldiers didn't want to pull them out of the crates and then smelt them and all too hard. So every now and then someone gets out there with metal detectors and ground penetrating radar looking for these brand new fighters that are in crates, but I think it's a bit of a myth.
It's a lot of effort to dig a hole. All right. So then tell me, sorry, keep going.
So I went out to the museum.
Yeah.
And they'd asked me to put this business plan together to help them run it on a more business-like footing. And the thing that surprised me was how many guys were out there, because they were all guys in those days, who were actually looking for paid employment.
Right. So
And
people who are ex-military. So we're talking Army. Are we talking Air Force and?
these guys were Army and Air Force.
Yeah.
And what shocked me about it was a lot of them had trade training.
Right.
And I just assumed that because of their trade training, they'd have no trouble getting employment.
Absolutely, I would assume that.
So I went away thinking we need to do more than just expand the business case for this museum. We need to do something much bigger and much grander that actually provides a whole lot of employment for veterans. So then I started to talking to people who were still serving, who were also on the board, and I was shocked to see that they were reaching points in their career. Very smart people, lots of experience, really competent.
In different trades, as you say.
Yeah, and they were still in the Army, and they were getting to that 20 or 30 year mark, and some of them were really terrified about what they were going to do post-service in terms of their employment, because military service is very physically demanding, and you train a lot of people up, and the military chews a lot of them up too, because physically it wears you out, particularly in the last 20 odd years when people have had a lot of service in the Middle East. So the work's very intense. But you don't get a big enough military pension to say, if you joined at 17 and you done 20 years, at 37 you can't retire.
Yeah.
Even if you had enough money to, none of your friends are retired. It's a pretty lonely existence.
Yeah, and you're kind of in the prime of your life, right?
Yeah. So I thought, looking at it, I have to look at what we do to expand this idea of a museum and actually turn it into something that's providing meaningful employment for veterans. And so this has been bubbling along for me now for over 10 years. But
why the passion? Why grab this? Why personally did this have such... I mean, I'm hearing your logic 100%, but why the fire in the belly?
Look, we all have our ups and downs in life, and I've had a few downs and some, some pretty dark patches. And some of these guys in the Army have been really helpful, helping me get through that bad times. You run a small business, sometimes you just think it's never going to get any good. People who run small businesses through COVID, if you own a coffee shop or a restaurant, it's awful. And so, these people have been, helpful to me in my own bad times. And every time I've ever talked to someone about how you repay them, they've always said, "Oh, no, you just pay it forward. You just do something to help somebody else." And I think that's a really good way of looking at it, is that if someone helps you, often it's not a material thing that they've helped you with. It's some sort of support, shoulder.
Well, support is just immeasurable, isn't it?
It is. So
if you can support someone in turn. But do you think there's also this real camaraderie? I mean, you've mentioned to me before about going back and having anniversary gatherings, and there's this real camaraderie. So, you probably have a real connection to that community.
Yeah. There's definitely that.
Yeah.
And I've seen guys out there, and not just out at the base, but other people I know in the military, when I get together with them for reunions, and they're worn out.
Yeah.
They're knees are worn out and backs are worn out, because it's just such a physically demanding career.
So there's and I've got a lot of clients who are veterans as well, and you can really see that they've kind of come in with a really good intention, either with contributing to society, but also having for them personally a sense of being part of this community and feeling part of the family, I guess, of the military world. And then there's a lot of trauma that can come through with the military time, and also, as you say, a lot of physical wear and tear. And so really having given so much, and then potentially feeling like they're left in the lurch, not knowing what's next, how to connect with the community with employment, and also feeling valued.
And that's what keeps coming back to me when I talk to these guys who are
Yeah.
very senior in the Army now, because I'm 60. Those guys that were cadets, we were all cadets together. They're at about retirement age, or they've got senior roles in the public service in government, where they're dealing with that, and they keep saying it's this lack of meaningful employment.
Lack of meaningful employment, yes, very powerful.
So it's not just employment; it's meaningful paid employment, and that got me back to thinking about these people working at the museum. What they were doing was meaningful, and they loved it, and it was reminding them of the wonderful times that they'd had, but it wasn't paid.
Right.
So I'm thinking, well, we need to do something that actually employs them, and then it sort of circles back a bit to the topic tonight about veterans being a wasted national resource, because we look at, those who are listening in tonight who aren't that familiar with Australia, what you normally see on Australia is there's a drought, or there's a fire,
oh yes,
or there's a flood, or there's a cyclone, and
still come visit. I mean, welcome.
Yeah, they don't happen all the time.
But it is true. It is true. Australia is a place of extremes.
And I think when you look at the COVID response here compared to other countries where people got indignant, I think we're just used to it here. You just go,
There's something in Australia called cop it sweet.
Yes.
You cop it sweet. You're like, okay, what are we up to? What are we doing now?
Yep. We're just going to roll our sleeves up and get on with it. And we don't particularly like it.
Yeah.
But unlike people in other countries who get, really indignant about their personal freedoms being impinged because they've got to wear a face mask, here we just say, no one likes it, but you just suck it up and get on with it.
It is the Australian way.
So we have this situation in Australia where it's remarkable. You'll watch some poor community where the little town is on a floodplain, and we'll get a deluge and the place gets washed away.
Yeah.
So in come the army to clean up. Everybody loves it. The army come in, they're organised, they're on the ball. The clean-up gets done without any fuss, and they're really appreciated.
Yeah.
But if you're in the army 6 months ago, then no one calls you up and says, hey, come and help us clean up this town. So we've got this situation where the army can't do its job properly because they're spending too much time cleaning up after a bushfire. And we had horrendous bushfires here just before COVID hit.
We did.
Thank goodness we didn't get them both at the same time. Awful clean-up. It was an awful disaster, but an awful lot of towns needed cleaning up. A lot of communities needed help.
Horrendous.
So we asked the army to do this,
yeah,
but we don't have any organisation of veterans to go and do it. And we live in, everyone says we live in uncertain times. You don't have to look far past what's happening in Ukraine to see that's pretty disturbing. And, there's sabre rattling here around Australia in the Southwest Pacific with, China's influence, and that worries people.
Yes, very unsettling.
Very unsettling. And I look at it and think, well, being trained as a soldier is a bit like being trained by a tennis professional. If you want to play like Roger Federer, you need to be out there practicing your tennis every day. So it's second nature. And soldiering's the same. So if we want to be able to stand up to people who, might want to bully us at some stage in the future, we need our soldiers as well trained as possible. Not because we want to be aggressive, but just so that people know...
Highly skilled. Yeah.
Yep. That our soldiers are very capable, and hopefully our soldiers are as well respected as the Ukrainians. Because I think if the Russian leadership knew now... if the Russian leadership knew 12 months ago what they know now about the Ukrainians' ability to defend themselves, perhaps they wouldn't have invaded.
Yeah, so we've got a small group that are very skilled and responded really well.
So we need to make sure that our Defence Force, Army, Navy and Air Force, are as well equipped as possible and as well trained as possible. And part of that training is making sure that they're not being...
Distracted.
So that leads me back to thinking, well, perhaps it's time we sat down as a nation and said, hey, these people who've got out of the Defence Force, they are perfectly positioned to help us clean up after disasters. And perhaps it's time that we as a nation looked as having a permanent force of these people who used to be in the military, who do all those clean-up jobs that we want after natural disasters. And then when there is no natural disaster, they can be building infrastructure in communities that we so badly need that our poor little local government organisations can never afford to do.
And the veterans are well and truly trained, as are the military, the army crowd, with regard to these operational strategies, what they need to be doing after these national disasters. So the logic of having this united veteran force to come in and help Australia in duress, so then the military can spend its time training to be military.
Yep, that's it.
So basically 2 birds in one.
That's exactly right. So
I like it.
So
you've got me.
Thank you. So I think the Swiss are a really good example.
Yeah.
Hitler never invaded Switzerland in World War II. He invaded a lot of other countries that were famously neutral. And the Swiss aren't particularly peace-loving. The reason he didn't invade them is because they're armed to the teeth.
Are they?
The Swiss have to do their national service.
Oh, of course they do.
And,
Right.
they all used to keep their rifle at home. And because it's such a mountainous country with these little narrow valleys that they have to drive into, Hitler was persuaded by his generals, don't even try it.
Don't go there.
So
Deterrent.
So the best way to stay peaceful is
deterrent.
Is deterrent, and make sure that no one wants to have a go at you because it will hurt them more than they would like.
So I'm going to make a leap here. Veterans First.
Yep.
So that's an organisation that you've set up.
Yes.
veteransfirst.com.au.
That's it. That's our little website.
That's my memory. Impressive.
Thank you very much, Kirsty. So our little website, veteransfirst.com.au, if you go to it, you'll see that we've got plans drawn up to build a world-class museum and gallery.
Yeah.
That would be a tourist attraction.
So is that in the Brisbane area, the Toowoomba area,
that's in the Toowoomba area. So that's on the
hour out of Brisbane in Queensland.
Yep.
Australia.
So the local government organisation here, our city council, they've allocated 40 hectares for us to build a museum and gallery.
Where?
So that's right on the northern edge of Toowoomba. It's on the suburb of Highfields.
Really?
Right at the northern edge there, there's an old dairy farm, and it's on the escarpment. That's why they call it Highfields up there, so anyone who's not from Queensland would know. But it's an old dairy farm. It's got nothing on it except lush green grass. There wouldn't be a tree you'd cut down. And you've got views for about 80 kilometres. It's just beautiful.
Congratulations. I didn't know
you.
this. This is great.
So if we built something there that was a world-class museum and gallery that you rotated exhibitions through, then that would employ hundreds of veterans because you'd have to staff it.
Hundreds?
Yeah, well, there's a museum and gallery in Hobart called Mona.
Yes.
They employ 100 guides.
You're right, yeah.
Just the guides. This is 100 of them. So when you start adding up administration, maintenance, gardening, and then all the people who are organising events and doing the marketing, they add up. And when I started looking at how do I make this little museum out at Oakey, the Army's museum, how do I make it employ lots of people, I gave myself a crash course in what makes museums and galleries work. And the light bulb moment for me is, of course, the Guggenheim in Bilbao.
Which I love, as you know.
Yes, yeah. So I'm here with Kirsty and with John, and John is Basque.
Yes, he is.
So I am going to give what I understand to be the truth, but I'll probably get some rude looks from John if I get this story wrong. But Bilbao's in Basque country, which isn't Spain, and the Basque separatists didn't want to be part of Spain for many, many years, And ETA, the Basque separatist movement, back in the 60s and 70s, they were extremists. And they used to carry out assassinations and bombings. And there was an awful lot of unrest in Spain. And the Basque country was very depressed economically. And Bilbao, a city in Basque country, had a river port in the city. But as the ships got bigger and got containerised, they didn't fit in the port. So the port got run down, and so the Basque local government administration there in Bilbao went out and asked the Guggenheim would they build a museum there. So it was a joint venture by the local regional government and the Guggenheim. So Guggenheim came and built this spectacular Frank Gehry design building that looks like a big piece of crushed.
It's a big fish.
It's a big fish.
It's a big fish. It's got a sense of motion and movement.
Motion and these great big titanium scales.
Gorgeous.
And they move different exhibitions in and out. So we're thinking of something along those lines where people will come to see a beautiful building, or they might come to see what's on display there and what the exhibitions are. But having the Guggenheim at Bilbao has transformed that local regional economy. So it's now a must-see tourist destination. If you go to, if you decide you're going to go to Spain on a holiday, everyone says you've got to go to the Guggenheim at Bilbao. So we see that there's lots of jobs that would be available for veterans because we would be...
Yeah, so this real ripple effect by creating this kind of must-see experience, this building, then it will draw the population to that area and therefore also increase jobs.
Yeah, and
I see the parallel, yeah.
And then you lean on the local business owners in town who are then looking for employees because of the extra tourism that's come here. So you would ask them, how many veterans are you employing?
Yeah.
Well, what's your veterans employment strategy if you're a bigger employer in town? So we get people doing meaningful full-time work that they know is helping the local community because they've drawn the tourists to the region.
So we've got this museum concept, which is pretty cool, and then we've got this issue of dealing with national disasters. How do you link those two? Are they two unrelated areas? Or
No, it wasn't, because I was thinking, can we get veterans to actually build a museum? And then when you start thinking about it, all of the trade skills and qualifications that you need to do that sort of construction work, if you've got people who aren't trained, it would just take far too long and be far too expensive, and all the occupational health and safety issues, it's far too dangerous. You're better off getting construction experts to build it as quickly as you can.
Yeah, and get it functional.
Yeah. But then I thought, it's on this magnificent 40-hectare site that needs to be turned into beautiful parks and gardens. And, of course, there's no time limit on building your parks and gardens. And I thought, well, if you're going to train people to build parks and gardens, and it doesn't matter how long it takes you to teach them to build retaining walls or do dry stone walling or paving or planting trees, they're the same skill sets that you use cleaning up after a disaster. You're moving earth, you're picking things up, you're cleaning up. So the equipment and the training and the skills you need to build parks and gardens are pretty much the same skills you need to clean them up after bushfires or floods or cyclones or natural disasters. So then you'd have a workforce that's building parks and gardens that you can pick up and move whenever you need to help after wasn't that long ago, didn't the volcano erupt in Tonga and we needed to go and send people to Tonga to help clean up? Tonga or Samoa?
Yeah.
Tonga.
Yeah, yep.
So there'd be a workforce. And of course, they're building parks and gardens. Doesn't matter if they down tools in the middle of building, swing sets and playgrounds for children.
So this is kind of like the concept of a task force that's kind of in a central kind of area, all skilling up. And then that task force can get mobilised where it needs to in Australia or other
wherever we want to in the Southwest Pacific
areas.
if you want to help our neighbours, yeah.
Wow. And have you taken this concept anywhere? Have you taken it to the local government or
taken it to the local government? That the problem the local government have is that they don't have the resources to be able to employ these people. But we've got a situation now where our federal government, the Australian federal government, is saying our Defence Force needs to be as prickly as possible.
Prickly, what does that mean?
Well, they talk about having our Defence Force like an echidna, like a spiny anteater. We make Australia like a spiny little animal with lots of spikes sticking out of it, so no big animal wants to eat it.
Okay, what?
So a bit like the Swiss.
Yeah.
If you're well armed and you're prickly, then a big predator isn't
deterrent again. But what does that mean for this? What's the implication?
Well, the implication here is that if we've got veterans helping in the civil community, then our soldiers
are busy being skilled up elsewhere.
Skilled up. So
Being
they're
prickly.
like Roger Federer. They're hitting that tennis ball all the time, making sure it lands within a centimetre of where you want it to get because you're just so good at it, because you're so well practiced.
Okay, so the federal government's wanting a prickly military, but now the next step is to try to get them to jump on board with this.
So it's one thing for the federal government to say, hey, we want our Defence Force to be as efficient as possible and as effective so that we are prickly and no one wants to have a go at us. But you can't be prickly if your soldiers aren't being trained because they're off too busy shoveling mud.
Yeah, dealing with natural. And we're heading into our summer, aren't we? And in summer here, we're about to have a wet summer potentially, and also a time of bushfires. Floods and fire.
Yeah, land of flooding rains. And
Australia's crazy, isn't it?
It is.
It really is. Well, it's a really interesting idea.
So I hope that makes sense for all those people who are listening in. For me, it's just this stream of consciousness, but sometimes I wonder whether it comes across logically to people.
I think it does. I think I really like how your brain works. I think you're looking for, 3 birds with one stone, actually. And, with regard to supporting the military, meaningful employment for the veteran affair, and also, for this community, if you can get this museum going, which is sounding pretty good, then, that's going to be really good for employment, and the local area will be saying thank you as well. And, we're about to have the Olympics here as well, so throw that in.
Well, again, all this work needs to be done before the Olympics.
Yeah.
So if we've got workforces who are able to build all these facilities, they're talking about having equestrian centres here.
Are they? Of course they are.
Everyone loves horses around Toowoomba.
Yes, that's true.
So this would be a perfect workforce to be building those facilities. And every local government, every small town you go to, not just in Australia, but nearly anywhere in the world, you can just see that if there was a workforce to help build more parks and gardens or maintain them or beautify things, then they'd be welcomed with my open arms.
Do you know something I really value about you is you're a bit of a trifecta. You're really wonderful in your lateral thinking, very good with problem solving. You're a very, very detail-orientated person, and you're a fantastic communicator. Those 3 are a very, very dynamic combination.
Thank you. And I'd put that down to the 4 years I spent in the Army at the Royal Military College, because they not literally beat that into you, but they would stand you up and say, well, what's your plan for fixing this problem? And articulate it. And so
there you go.
So that's what the Army does. So that's what that training is about. They'd say, you've got these people here and you've got to move them from A to B. Yeah. You've got to get them across a river, and you've got to make sure that they get all their equipment with them, and you've got this much time and these are the resources.
Yep.
And then you'd have to put that plan together.
Yep.
And then you'd have to stand up in front of a group and articulate that plan. And then everyone would politely tear it apart.
Right.
So that's why...
These skills that I've just pointed out you have, yeah.
So, and that's why when we go and have to clean up after a flood, that's what the senior officers and the senior non-commissioned officers do. They go in and they go, okay.
Yeah, project management.
And what's the order of work, and how do we do it, and what resources have we got, and how do we do that? Yet, once they leave the military, these people who are well and truly overrepresented amongst our unemployed, they've got all those skills, and we're not using them.
And let's talk about that, because mental health-wise, you know, it's so extremely important to have a sense of worth, to feel valued for what you bring and what you contribute. And when you are well and truly within your employment years, but you've left the military either because you've just wanted to, your headspace or your body has said time to go, but you've got all these employable years left, you've got all this skill, it's so important that you're grabbed and that you're appreciated and you're put into a position, or you can find a position where you're able to use those skills and feel a sense of purpose. So if you don't have that, we are on a fast track. First of all, we've got massive adjustment issues coming out of the military, I'm guessing. Well, I know clinically. But we've got a major issue with regard to self-worth, potential depression. You know, so really getting this employment happening is critical for mental health, and it's so preventative, isn't it? If you could jump in right there.
And what I like about this plan that we sort of put together, even though it's, you know, it's still a bit at back of the envelope, is that...
What does that mean, back of the envelope?
Well, you know, you've scratched it all out, and you've got a second-hand envelope and a and a marker pen, so it's, you know, not quite
like that.
It's not quite your 800-page
not
thesis.
Quite a dossier yet.
No,
yeah.
But it's getting people out of the military, but they're still using the same skills, and they're still in an organisation that's similar to the military in terms of its organisational structure and goes out and solves problems, but you know, no one's carrying weapons, and if your knee's bad, you're not expected to run. You can drive a bobcat or drive a bulldozer.
Functional, we can work around.
We can do all of that, but we're gradually taking them out of an organisation. This is one of the things that I hear, is that people go out of the military where they've been in a very structured environment and everyone's expected to be really competent, and then they go and work somewhere where it's all just a little bit, how's it going? Yeah, it'll be right. And they struggle with this...
lack of structure, role.
Yeah, or people not doing things properly.
Yeah.
You know, I go into businesses, and I was talking to a business owner today about one of his staff, and she's really methodical and really lovely and does everything properly, but she takes about 6 times longer than anyone else to do it. And I'm thinking, that's great that this guy employs her. So, you know, people come out of the military and look, they've busted their knee.
Sorry, are you saying people coming out of the military, it takes 6 times longer to do something?
Well,
it's not what you're saying, is it?
If someone does,
yeah,
but you put them in, so they might they've busted their knee in the military.
Yeah.
So they're out because it's now taking them 6 times longer to do something that...
Oh, okay. Yep.
You know, but when you get to an organisation like this, it doesn't matter. And I talked to this fellow today about this young lady, and I said, I bet at the end of the day, her till always balances. And he said, yeah.
So point being, there's other strengths well and
she's
truly.
got, yep. He said she's always on time.
Dependable, reliable. Work. Yep.
But she's really slow. But that's just her.
And is she ex-military?
No, she's not. She's not.
Your point that this could be the case.
Yeah, but you know, I just use that as I've watched someone employ this woman. It's got nothing to do with the military.
Yeah.
She's got a job where she's valued, even though she can't perform at the same level as other people.
So when we talk about this concept of having this veteran kind of natural disaster response unit, that's got a ring to it, doesn't it?
It does.
It does. We have to see what the acronym for that is. It's kind of, okay, what do you bring if you have got restrictions and limitations, which we as the Australian people have really pretty much put on you probably from your military time.
Yeah, this really, really annoys me is that people look at veterans and say, they need entitlements, or they got this or that. We keep putting labels on them like they're a liability, and they're not a liability, they're an asset.
Absolutely.
So you keep looking at, it's no different to saying, oh, I've got a car, but it won't drive any faster than 100 kilometres an hour. Well, okay, you don't drive it.
Yeah, but that's my point. My point is that, this concept is having these people come together, and all the strengths that they bring is absolutely valued. But areas where they might have difficulties, that it could be a supportive environment for that.
Exactly. We give them a supportive environment, and if someone can only work 3 days a week, say, okay, well, we just give them work 3 days a week.
Yeah. So very, very, very flexible, very tailored to the individual.
Very tailored to the individual, and they will be really effective.
And if we've learned anything from COVID, it is we can tailor the work to the individual, and the workplace can become quite adjustable and flexible to the circumstance, really.
Yep. So we've got one lady who works with us, and she's a cancer survivor. Mm. She can't work 5 days a week straight. She originally started with us, and she wanted to work full time, and she'd get really emotional if she worked 2 weeks straight, 2 5-day weeks. And we worked out that she's just not well enough to do that.
Fair.
She's really skilled. And so what we worked out now is she works Mondays and Tuesdays, and she has Wednesdays off, and she works Thursdays and Fridays. Yeah. So in the military, you can't do that.
Yeah. Well, I think this is so smart. I think this is so smart because do you like it? I've jumped in now.
Yep, thank you.
Do you like that we?
I do.
looking at the strengths of the resource that the veterans are, but I love the concept of it being a supportive environment and really being able to value what they've previously contributed and continue to support them now. I think that's a great idea. I think it's really good. I'm really curious about the next step.
Well, there's a defence review. The government in Australia has got a defence review. They're reviewing everything. So maybe they'll hear your podcast and someone will say... Maybe
you need to go knock.
Oh, maybe I've done a bit of knocking.
I'm sure you have.
Bit of annoying people. Yep.
You've got to be a squeaky wheel, don't you?
You do.
Bernie, thank you so much for coming along.
Thank you, Kirsty, for having me.
I really appreciate it. We're going to keep talking now.
We will.
Okay, everyone. So thank you so much for coming along. This is Signpost for Living with Dr. Kirsten Hunter, and I don't know if you've caught me online, but I'm all over the place. So I've got the webpage with a whole lot of stuff, kirstenhunterauthor.com, Facebook and Instagram, Kirsten Hunter Author, and with Twitter, Kirsten Hunter AU. We've got YouTube, Psych in Your Car, and this is Signpost for Living with Dr. Kirsten Hunter. Thank you, Bernie.
Thanks for having me, Kirsty.
Too much fun. Thank you. Bye.